Y'all ready?
Kick it. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, once again to another fun and exciting episode of Hardheaded, the only podcast that is out there that is practical and realistic.
Not the only one. I'm sure there's some other realistic.
We are the only one, Chet.
Okay.
The only hard-headed, practical, and realistic podcast. Matt, what's on your mind today?
Tell you what's on my mind is we have a special guest with us today. And if you remember back a few podcasts, I can't remember which one it was, I mentioned Bob Hamer. Mm-hmm. And we're fortunate enough that he's with us on the show today. And we're going to talk about some of his work. He's a incredible author, but prior to that, he was an FBI agent, spent 26 years in the FBI.
Nice.
Prior to
that, he was and is a United States Marine. So I'm going to, real quick, so I don't leave anything out, I'm going to read from his bio, and then we'll kick it. I'll introduce Bob, and we'll go from there. And I'm really excited for today's podcast with some of the topics that we're going to talk about, just because a lot of them are going to be extremely important advice for some parents out there with their kids, and in this online environment that we've got, and protecting them from predators, as well as listening to some of Bob's stories from his illustrious career in the FBI. So, and I'll let him give his introduction where he talks about the different types of personalities that he has. So starting off, Bob Hamer retired from the FBI after 26 years as a special agent. He worked organized crime, gangs, terrorism, and child exploitation. Much of his career was spent undercover. In assignments lasting anywhere from several days to more than 3 years, Bob successfully posed as a drug dealer, contract killer, pedophile, international weapons dealer, and white-collar criminal. Bob received numerous awards throughout his career, including the coveted FBI Director's Award for Distinguished Service and 5 United States Attorney Awards for Distinguished Service. Bob has written and consulted for television to include shows such as Sue Thomas, FBI, The Inside, Law and Order SVU, and Sleeper Cell. He is the author of 3 award-winning books, The Last Undercover, Enemies Among Us, and Targets Down. He has also written 3 novellas, Detour to Justice, Expendable for the Cause, and Blood in the Desert. Bob teamed with New York Times bestselling author Oliver North to write American Heroes on the Homefront and Counterfeit Lies. He also co-authored Born on the 5th of July with Tim Lee. A Marine Corps veteran, Bob is married. He and his wife have 2 children and 5 grandchildren.
Awesome.
And so how I was introduced to Bob was, after my injury, I spent about 4 months inpatient in the hospital. And Bob would come through and he would chat, visit, and drop off his books for us to read to pass the time while we were laying there healing up. And so that's my initial introduction to Bob was through the hospital. So,
Bob, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's good to be with you. Wish I were there in person rather than remote, but that's the way it is.
We're not at the level that we can fly you out and do this in person yet.
Well, let me know when the budget increases.
Yeah. We'll have you back when the budget gets there.
I'll be there. Although I have a face for radio, so this is probably better for me.
Well, you've got a lot of faces, according to your profile there.
Well, I was really fortunate. Early in my FBI career, I gravitated toward the undercover work. And so that's what I sought out, the undercover assignments. I loved just going face to face with the bad guys. It's kind of it may sound somewhat naive, but the Plains Indians used to have what they called a coup stick, and they would count coup. And the idea was to get close enough to your enemy to touch them. And then you touch them with the stick, and then you would notch your stick. And I guess in a way, with me as an undercover agent, that's what I liked. I mean, it was one thing to conduct an investigation, gather up all the evidence, interview the witnesses, then put together the prosecution, contact the prosecutor, get an affidavit, and go after him. and get your conviction. But I love just becoming one of them without becoming one of them, and getting close enough that I could actually touch them before we had the arrest. And I just gravitated toward that. You mentioned as you were reading my biography, I had like a dozen different personalities. I laughed that my wife and I have been married for 47 years, and she's the same sweet girl that I first met in college. And I've been a dozen different personalities. So it's like, how cool is it to be married to me? You get, you get tired of me. I'll be somebody different. Sometimes you say, I don't like you playing this role as a contract killer. And I said, honey, I'm going to be a pedophile next week.
Right.
Give me a break. So
contract killing is not that bad.
Yeah. It's all relative.
So talking about being close to your target, I've read all of your fiction books, and Matt's telling me this is 100% true, but you mentioned in your books, and I imagine there's some similarities with some of the stories that you have in there, but playing songs that talked about you being undercover on the radio while you had the target with you? Oh yeah.
I had a prosecutor one time tell me, he says, you've got to knock it off because you make people look stupid. And so I would play, I got to admit, I somewhat viewed each of my undercover assignments, each of my meetings as kind of an episode on a TV series. So you had to have a soundtrack. So yeah, I would be playing music. I'd have the bad guys in the car, and we're playing Folsom Prison Blues or Jailhouse Rock.
Awesome.
My favorite one, and I was a huge country western fan, a big Charlie Daniels fan. In fact, Matt and I went to a Charlie Daniels concert. We took our wives and we went backstage and got to meet Charlie Daniels.
Oh, that's cool.
But he had a song out called Uneasy Rider, and it's essentially the story of this long-haired hippie who goes into a redneck bar and gets confronted by the rednecks in the bar. And there's a line in there, and I was doing it was a 3-year undercover assignment, and it began with counterfeit cigarettes. It evolved into a $60 million shoulder fire missile deal and the North Korean counterfeit supernote. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But every time the main conduit for the weapons got into my undercover car, and this happened like 6 or 7 times when he would get in the car, I had it cued right to the line of the Charlie Daniels song, so that when I turned the engine on and the recording started, the first line you hear on every undercover tape is, "Don't you know it? This man's a spy. He's an undercover agent for the FBI." And I would just, wow. I love doing stuff like that. And part of it was, I think, to kind of increase the tension, right. Kind of get the adrenaline flowing, make it a little more tense to see how far I could push without getting caught. But part of it was I just like screwing with the bad guys.
That's awesome.
One of the pedophiles that we convicted, we got him when he got into my car, and I turned on the ignition. It was cued to another Charlie Daniels song, "Simple Man," and it was right to the line where essentially the line is, "We should take these child molesters out to the swamp, put them on their knees, and tie them to a stump, and let the alligators and the bugs do all the rest." Yeah. But they never caught on.
Oh, God.
See, and I tell all these stories, and now that you've told them, now they know that they're real, because
I knew they were real. I knew they were real ahead of time, but I mean, that's,
I don't think you did. See, he questions everything that I say. But no, I mean, and then that's, incredible. And so you mentioned the supernote, and that came from. I remember reading that in one of your books, and I'm having trouble. Was that Enemies Among Us, or is that the one?
Well, kind of. I mean, parts of Enemies Among Us and Targets Down
Yeah.
and Counterfeit Lies. All three of those have.
Yeah, because I know you kind of took bits and pieces from different cases and implemented them into your books. And so I guess if you would, for our audience, talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, Counterfeit Lies was an interesting case in the sense that it began so simply and went far beyond anything that we wanted to do. Now, you got to understand, it's not like television where the supervisor walks out into the squad bay and says, hey, today we need a contract killer. Who wants to do it? And somebody raises their hands. So in the FBI, in order to work undercover, you have to be a certified undercover agent. So you have to go through the selection process and the schooling, and not everybody wants to do it. Not every agent works undercover. There are a lot of great agents that never have any desire to work undercover. A lot of people that get selected for the program maybe only do one or two undercover cases, and then they find that it's either a little too challenging or too dangerous, or the hours are are beyond what they really wanted to do, and they were more interested in something else, so they don't do the undercover work. So there really aren't that many certified undercover agents. And I used to joke that on the West Coast, I got all the IOU assignments toward the end of my career. If they were looking for somebody that was impotent, old, and ugly, then they would call on me because I was certified to work undercover. So toward the end of my career, I worked 3 undercover cases at the same time. But Operation Smoking Dragon began with counterfeit cigarettes, and we were targeting an Asian criminal syndicate that was bringing in counterfeit cigarettes manufactured in North Korea and China, and they were smuggling them to the United States, to the West Coast, and then distributing. And the reason the Bureau was involved, and quite frankly, when I was first called about this, it was like, what do we care about counterfeit cigarettes? What's the big deal? I mean, why isn't alcohol, tobacco, and firearms working it? But the thing was that these counterfeit cigarettes were filtering down to mom and pop grocery stores. Some of those stores are owned by Muslims that were using the proceeds to finance terrorism. So the Bureau was taking this approach that we're going to go after those ultimate distributors that are financing terrorism, and then we're going to go after the importers, the ones that are bringing in the United States, avoiding the taxes, and putting them out into commerce. For me, quite frankly, as long as it was undercover, I didn't care what it was. I just wanted out of the office, and I enjoyed the opportunity to be an undercover agent.
So the cigarette deal just kind of seemed a little harmless at first, I guess. Well, the whole part of terrorism in there kind of doesn't.
Well, no, but yeah, the actual cigarette deal, you're right. It was like, what's a big deal? Yeah, I'll do it. If it means I don't have to be in the office, yeah, count me in, sign me up. Ironically, there was an informant that I only met twice. I could not pick him out of a lineup right now. I don't even recall his name. I mean, if you waterboarded me, I couldn't tell you the guy's name. He said that the people he was dealing with they were more confident and comfortable dealing with older Caucasians than they were with people from within the Asian community. So I fit the bill. I was older and I was white. So we set up an undercover warehouse in Pomona, California, if you're familiar with the Los Angeles area. The warehouse was straight out of Hollywood, where we had cameras. We could record all of the activities that went on there. I had an office. We videotaped it. And I told this when I met the major importer of counterfeit cigarettes, and said, look, I've got this warehouse. I've got access to long-haul truck drivers. I can get your cigarettes distributed throughout the country. Every once in a while, I can get these cigarettes smuggled through the ports in Long Beach and Los Angeles. but that probably is only going to happen about once a month because I've got 3 guys that work at the ports, and when they work on the same days, when they're scheduled the same days, I can probably get your containers through. Now, they were bringing a lot of containers through without my help, but that's how this whole thing began. So we start with counterfeit cigarettes. The first container that they smuggled in, they stored at my warehouse. They needed help getting it back to some Russian mob guys on the East Coast. We go back to, we haul a container back to Allentown, Pennsylvania. I'm meeting with 5 Russian mob guys. They take the cigarettes, get delivered. They actually take me to a safe house. I'm sitting in there watching them affix counterfeit tax stamps to these counterfeit cigarettes because they're going to sell these cigarettes in New York City. At that time, a pack of cigarettes in New York City was going for, I think, between $10 and $12 a pack. Well, an entire carton of counterfeit cigarettes was going for about $8 or $10 a carton. So you're talking at
a lot of good margins,
that are greater than cocaine and heroin, and nobody's working the cases. So it was a real money maker. We deliver the first container of cigarettes. We identify the safe house. Nobody gets arrested. Nothing happens. I come back to the West Coast. Everybody's happy. I mean, the bad guys are happy with me because this got handled, and now it just keeps moving on and progressing. I meet a couple more people in the organization. Eventually they bring me ecstasy and crystal meth. Quite frankly, as a joke, my case agent said, "Look, Bob, we've got stolen cars. We've got counterfeit cigarettes. We've got counterfeit postage stamps. We've got counterfeit clothing, all of these different things. The case is progressing." He said, "We need some guns to put on the press conference table to make the people think this is a dangerous case."
Got to get a Kodak moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And you would not believe this if you saw it in a movie. You don't use coincidence to advance the plot, but we're driving down the Pomona Freeway. I'm with the bad guy. I turn to him and I say, "Look, I got a client down in Alabama. He gets hired out by these third world countries for security. I need a case of AK-47s in your next container of counterfeit cigarettes." And just then a National Guard flatbed truck went by with a tank on it. And he looks at me and he points to the tank and he says, "I get you tank." He said, "I get you anything but nuclear weapons." He said, I just get boats for drug dealers down in South America." And we're going, holy crap. We wanted like a 9mm to put on the press conference table. And the next thing I know, I'm introduced to another guy who now introduces me to a couple Chinese generals, and we're negotiating for $60 million worth of QW2 missiles. And
wow.
All because incredible. We wanted a 9mm on the table.
All from investigating cigarettes.
Yeah.
And what started out as one person, between what we did on the East Coast and the West Coast, 2 different undercover operations, but we indicted 87 people, all starting with one. And it progressed into the super note. And I'll just very quickly say that North Korea counterfeits our $100 bill. And it's called the super note, and it was a near perfect replica of our $100 bill. So after we started working this weapons case, the people at headquarters said, "Do you think you could get the super note that's manufactured by North Korea?" And eventually I was able to buy $1 million worth of the counterfeit super notes. And by the time this case was wrapped up, North Korea was going to give me $40 million a year to launder in the United States. So it just,
that's what changed. They had to change the way the bill looked and put more security. Because and then that, of course, the pictures, not the technology per se, is carried over to all the bills. since then, and my kids came across an old $5 bill the other day. My kids, Bob, I've got a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and an 11-year-old, and literally called it fake money, like the old bill. They're like, that's
Like the
look
real
at that.
one.
That's not even close, Like, no, that's the real $5 bill from way back in the day, and that they make changes to those, so it's not as easy to counterfeit. They didn't believe me. They're like, no, they've always looked, like, no, really, they used to look like this. It's kind of funny.
No, I was the same way when I was undercover at the racetracks, Santa Anita and Hollywood Park. We were targeting a group of men that were fixing thoroughbred horse races. And the new $100 bill came out in 1996. And when it came out, I just assumed that, well, when we're talking counterfeit bills, we're talking about guys that are Xeroxing them in the back of their print shop. I didn't realize that even in 96, the real reason for the bill changing in 96 was to prevent these foreign governments from counterfeiting our money. It's an act of war to counterfeit another nation's currency. So when, like, North Korea was doing this, they were committing an act of war. Well, they thought that new bill that came out in 96 was counterfeit proof, and we certainly were able to prove that it wasn't. And when it first came out, what happened when these bills were coming out, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing and the Treasury Department were notifying the merchants that, hey, look, Matt Amos isn't on the $100 bill. It's Benjamin Franklin. And so the banks would look, if they had Matt Amos on it, they know it was counterfeit. Well, the North Koreans were getting all of these memos, how to identify the counterfeit bill. They were correcting their plates. So by the time our case went down, there were 3 top secret marks on the bill, and you could not tell with the naked eye that this was a counterfeit bill. They were using the same paper we had. They had the same printing presses that we were using. They were nearly identical.
Wow.
So it was to the point that even banks had a hard time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Banks couldn't detect it. Only with the Federal Reserve banks, because there was a certain smell that they could detect through their machinery, is how they were able to detect it.
Wow.
See, that
All from cigarettes. All started with cigarettes, and then
all began with cigarettes. So, sometimes those undercover cases, they were straight. It began with A and you ended up with A. It was a straight drug case. But other cases just went all over the map, and that was certainly an example of something that began with cigarettes. We had the largest seizure of counterfeit postage stamps ever, clothing, counterfeit pharmaceuticals that were being sold to Canadian online pharmacy companies, the weapons and the drugs. We had 2 kilos of crystal meth that the DEA lab in National City, California said was the highest quality crystal meth they had ever analyzed. And my people, the people I was getting the drugs from, said it was made on a Chinese military base.
Wow.
That's crazy.
How long does a mission take like that? I mean, I'm assuming you're not talking with those guys every day. You just...
Well, yeah. I mean, the way the Bureau works, and I won't bore you with all the details, but essentially, once you have what's considered an undercover operation, you have 6 months, and then it's renewable every 6 months. So that particular case lasted 3 years. So before we finally took everything down. And it was one of those things, I mean, we just got to the point. Well, one, they weren't going to give me $60 million to buy the weapons.
Yeah.
And it was one of those, it was a little frustrating because we're trying to go to the government and say, look, don't we provide weapons to other foreign countries, the third world countries that we're trying to befriend and everything? Let me buy these weapons and we'll give them the QW2 missiles.
Right.
And we figured, we can work this out. If you watch this on TV, if this were Mission Impossible, they would have gotten the money and then gotten the weapons, and then it would gone even farther. At one point, even in this Asian criminal syndicate case, they were financing the campaign for a foreign government's presidency. And my deal was, I said, look, you gotta, if we get this to go, if our guy gets elected, you got to make me the ambassador. Yeah. And they said, yeah, we can do that.
Oh, cow.
It's like, wow. I said, all I wanted to do was go back to DC as the ambassador, and
you just keep asking and they keep giving, you got to see how far they'll go.
It's until you ask, they're not going to give it.
So one of the things I think that really piqued our interest in talking about you, and I know that the one book that I have not read, and it's definitely the nonfiction one, but working with the NAMLA organization and getting into pedophilia, and we were talking about definitely some value that our listeners can get, being about what can we do. We all have either teenagers or preteens in our households, between Matt, Troy, and myself, and you've kind of been in an area that none of us even want to think about as far as processes and strategies that people have to lure younger people into some very dark places. And we were talking about, man, that would be awesome to get some pointers from you on how to, as parents, can we kind of keep an eye out from that kind of activity for our kids.
Yeah, no, first of all, I applaud you for even bringing up this topic, because I've been on other podcasts where they're more than willing to talk about the contract killings and the racetrack and the counterfeit cigarettes, but they don't really want to talk about this case. So just briefly, for the listeners' sake, I got involved in an operation that the FBI arrested a man back in Knoxville, Tennessee, who had child pornography on his computer. And when they were looking at the pictures, there were actually pictures of him having sex with little boys over in Thailand. And when they arrested him and interviewed him, he said that he had gone on a trip through a travel agent in Los Angeles. And I was stationed in Los Angeles at the time. So the Bureau decided they were going to target this travel agent who was putting together overseas trips for BLs, boy lovers is what they call them. For me, one of the exciting things about an undercover case was becoming so knowledgeable of a subject that you could sell yourself to the other side. So, whether it's weapons, now you got to learn about missiles or whatever, or if you're real estate, you got to learn about real estate. If you're dealing with stolen art, you have to learn about the art. Well, I had heard of NAMBLA, but I really didn't know anything about that much about the pedophilia movement and particularly the boy lover movement. And this was something that if I was going to work this case, I had to come across as being a boy lover, as a BL. So I began researching on the internet. The Bureau had already identified some predicated chat rooms where boy lovers were hanging out and everything. And I would go into these chat rooms as Bobby 13 and had within seconds, I had guys coming at me, offering me, wanting to chat with me, teaching me, I hate to say it, but teaching me how to masturbate and talk about sex and all this kind of stuff with me. And typically, one, I was too slow a typist to keep up with most of the chats, and I was too stupid at that time to be thinking like a 13-year-old, a current day 13-year-old. I was probably in my 50s when that started. So you just couldn't walk in there and pretend to be a 13-year-old and not be up on all the lingo of the 13-year-old. So one of my tricks of getting offline was, hey, the computer's in the kitchen and my mom just came home. I just heard the garage door open. I'm out of here, and would leave. So, excuse me. But anyway, so I got involved we were targeting this travel agent. And during my research, I ran across NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. Although I'd heard of the group, I didn't know that much about it. But I just figured that most people that would be going on this trip that were boy lovers would be a member of NAMBLA. At the time, you just sent in $35 and you could join the organization. And that's what I did. I joined the organization trying to build up my credibility as a boy lover. And again, learning how they talked, how they walked, how they behaved, what they were thinking. And that was all part of this persona to become the boy lover to sell to the travel agent. Well, it turned out the whole travel agency case fell apart, but I had joined NAMBLA. They started sending me emails. Hey, can you send Christmas cards to our incarcerated NAMBLA members and be a pen pal to some of these people that have been stuck. So the U.S. Attorney's Office said, yeah, you can continue that phase of the investigation. So at the time, I was actually on the Joint Terrorism Task Force, but I was still communicating with these NAMBLA members. We were exchanging emails. Well, no, not emails, but we were exchanging letters and Christmas cards and all that. And some of their letters were extremely graphic. Some were, it ran the gamut. I got letters that would said, hey, I've become a Christian. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Thank you for the card, but please don't communicate with me again. I got others that said, hey, what's your favorite age group? Here's what I did. And they were extremely graphic about the things that they did. Eventually, I got invited to their secret meetings. And as the case evolved, after 2 years, we arrested 8 members of the group's inner circle. But in prison, I communicated with about 165 members. But then at their secret meetings, I went face to face and met with these guys.
So, of all the cases that you've worked out, I imagine this one was extremely taxing. Our stomachs are turning just hearing you talk about it, and you being there and being around those people. I'm sure that was something hard to deal with.
It was my most difficult case from a lot of different aspects. I've been in more dangerous cases. I've been shot at. I've shot people. I had drug deals that went badly. I was involved with La Cosa Nostra, the Italian mafia. I had guys threaten to bury me under the family plan. I had a guy throw a brick at me one time. I've been in much more dangerous, physical danger situations. But when a person would hire me to be a contract killer, they really didn't care whether I liked football or the ballet. They didn't care if I was a Republican or a Democrat. They just wanted to know if they thought that I could kill the person they were hiring me to kill. Right. Well, this was a whole different mindset where you had to think like them. I had to view the world through their eyes. A good example, there was a Sylvan Learning commercial, and all 4 of us would watch that commercial and think, oh, well, maybe I should get my child or grandchild help at Sylvan. No, this guy videotaped the commercial and played it over and over again because he was in love with the little boy.
Oh gosh.
The example that I shared with Matt was when I first went back to New York City for the first time that I was invited to a NAMBLA meeting, they gave us a tour of Times Square. And I could sense it as I was walking with these NAMBLA members. I could sense the excitement. And it was almost like when you're going to the big football game and you're walking in line, getting ready to give your ticket as you go through the Coliseum gates to go take your seat for the Rose Bowl or for whatever this huge football game is. Well, you could sense the excitement of these men as we were nearing the Toys R Us. Now, the Toys R Us is no longer there now, but we walked in and these men ran to the railing and they're watching these little boys on the Ferris wheel going around. They had a 60-foot indoor Ferris wheel. And I sat there and listened to these men talk about what they were going to do. They go, oh, like, look at that kid with the number 32 jersey. Oh, isn't he cute? Here's what I'm going to do to him. And they were talking about, pretty graphic about what they wanted to do to those kids. And I told Matt that had I not been undercover, I would have thrown him over the railing. But so to realize that those people were out there and feasting on something that was very innocent, of parents taking their kids to Toys R Us on a Friday evening just for a family outing, and that these pedophiles were there just gawking at these children. So I had to think like them. At one point, somebody they brought up, who's your favorite child actor, and guys were throwing out names and everything, and someone had said it, so I did it. I used the same name, but when it came to my turn, I said, "Oh, Ricky Schroeder from Silver Spoons," and I mean, I'd never seen an episode of Ricky Schroeder and Silver Spoons, but I knew it was a show that was on. But these guys would watch these shows like that because they just loved children and loved them in a sexual way.
Good grief. So
it's disturbing.
It's
I have 4 boys. My oldest is 8. So 8, 6, 4, and almost 2 tomorrow. And man, just hearing that just makes me angry.
Yeah. So, and one of the things I saw, I happened to be on a hunting trip a while back with one of the guys in the group was a chaplain in the Louisiana State Prison system. So a couple of the state prisons in Louisiana, and he was saying that he's seen in the last decade the prison population shift from what you would typically think of as a thug, drug dealing, some kind of a abuse person, to the whole prison population becoming what they call gray hairs, older men, middle-aged men, getting tangled up on some internet stuff and going way beyond what is acceptable in a society. I think today, in today's day and age, and Bob, you can confirm this, it's probably the most opportunity for some deviant like that to have access to stuff that they don't need to have access to with technology and the communication. You talked about this case even starting because of some emails and getting a hold of a hard drive, right? Absolutely.
No, you're right, Chet. I mean, it's that society has changed and technology has changed for the good and for the bad, and it does allow this to go on. I mean, the organization NAMBLA began in '78. Well, they don't really need NAMBLA anymore, and we weakened it. It still exists, but it's extremely weak now. It's just an online presence. but now you can go into these chat rooms. I don't have to kind of sidle up to someone in a bar or a coffee shop and find out if we have the same desires. You can meet in a chat room online and then decide to meet up after we've shared our desires and our wants and everything. I mean, what used to be the magazines, the pedophile magazines, the child pornography, now it's, for the most part, it's all on the internet. You have file sharings and you have these photos. One of the guys that we convicted was an ordained minister that gave me 125 images of child pornography, and I think it was 8 videos of men having sex with boys. And this was an ordained minister that had this collection that he'd shared with me.
Wow.
And I guess that kind of goes into what you and I talked about the other day, is you just, number one, you never know who it could be. You know what I mean when we were talking about that. And what signs, I guess, what do we as parents need to look for, and how do we protect our kids in that environment, being that it's online or in person, when that person could be your pastor?
Well, you're absolutely right, Matt. I thought, kind of going into this case, that, look, I knew what a pervert looked like. The guy had black, greasy hair. He had a trench coat, probably horn-rimmed glasses, and he hung out at a public park and flashed people. Well, of the 8 members of NAMBLA that we convicted, we had one was a PhD psychologist who worked at 2 Chicago area hospitals. One was a divorced dentist from Dallas who loved children. He used to put out ads that he loves children and children love him. He was a good-looking guy, had his own boat and airplane, and actually flew in his own airplane to a meeting we had in Florida. One was a personal trainer. We had 3 special ed teachers. There was no way. I could not provide you a checklist to say, okay, if they, blonde hair, blue eyed, 6 foot, 180 pounds, it's going to be,
or this profession or that profession. Yeah.
Right. So I dealt in NAMBLA members, I dealt with Mensa members, and I dealt with the illiterate. I dealt with guys that were multimillionaires and others that were on welfare. You just couldn't tell. Some were married, some were not. Some liked adult women and little boys. Some liked only children. And one guy in particular, he didn't believe that he was neither homosexual nor heterosexual. He was a boy lover and believed that all he was attracted to were little boys between the ages of, I think his age of preference was like 10 to 12 years old. That's what he was attracted to. So you dealt with some people that what you might think is a heterosexual because they were married and had children, but they were attracted to little boys. So it was just very difficult to try to identify anyone based upon some sort of profiling.
So if you were, if you were a parent today, you have grandkids that maybe a little bit older, but what advice do you have for somebody that's listening today that, I know we've been restrictive on what apps my kids are able to download on their devices. Heck, you got to be 12 before you even get a device in my house, and which I mean, to some people sounds like, oh, you're very conservative, and to other people that I can't believe you're doing, you're letting your 12-year-old have something. But What advice do you have on the alertness, the awareness, and the nosiness that a parent may need to make sure their kids aren't getting tangled up with, I know TikTok or some of these other apps that some of these predators may be on?
Let me back up and just say that, and I'm speaking strictly of NAMBLA. I'm not a psychologist. I didn't even take psychology in college. My only experience in a long-term process was during this undercover investigation. So I haven't spent a career as a family counselor or anything. But what I found in the NAMBLA investigation, that not one NAMBLA member was able to successfully target a little boy that came from a family that had a strong, loving father figure. And typically what these men would do, they would seek out the child that did not have a loving father figure in the home. They would groom the child as much as they would the single parent, the single mom. And this would happen in a variety of ways. And, we've all seen these stories where the soccer coach, there are 10 kids on the team and he only molested one child. And you got 9 parents and 9 boys saying, oh no, the coach never did anything inappropriate to us. The coach never said anything or did anything, but there was that one. And that was the one that these people would target. I believe this is true of boys and girls, but they are seeking a father figure. They want someone that loves them and that they love. And so the NAMBLA members would present themselves as this person. Now I'll back up and say, sure, we had those NAMBLA members that were more aggressive and a sort of like the slam bam thank you ma'am type of sexual encounter, but most of them, they enjoyed the relationship building. So they would find the single mom in the apartment complex or in the school setting or the camp setting or the coaching setting. They would find that child that wanted a father figure. They would then go to the mother and say, hey, look, you're working hard. I'll watch little Timmy while you go out to dinner tonight. And, why don't you and then eventually let Timmy sleep over with us, or let Timmy go on a camping trip with me and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of these mothers, just because the child wanted the relationship, then the mothers would encourage it and would welcome this. Now, there were plenty of great people out there that are involved in some great charities that aren't pedophiles, but that's how it would begin. So that was the first thing. That was the one thing we say. When I talk to parents, I kind of use the acronym and I use ACT, A-C-T. It kind of comes from my Marine Corps experience that I still remember. It's been 4+ decades since I went to OCS, but I still remember the 5-paragraph order, which was SMEAC, and the troop leading steps, which is BAMSIS. So I think of ACT, and it stands for affirm, communicate, and trust. And a child that is affirmed, a child that believes that he is loved, isn't going to necessarily seek out someone outside the home for this loving relationship. So look, kids love words of affirmation. So you need to be building up your child so that they believe that they are loved and wanted and healthy. Have a healthy mental attitude about themselves and about their place in the family and in society. Communicate. One of the things that most of these predators would do when they were targeting, and we're talking about persuasion predators here. We're not talking about the guy that breaks into the bedroom in the middle of the night and snatches the child.
Right.
But almost every one of these that I dealt with, it was like, look, this is our secret. We don't have to tell anyone, because we could get in trouble for doing this if they found out. That they wouldn't understand how special our relationship is. So this is just gonna be our little secret. You understand what I'm saying? Just between you and me. You don't have to tell your mom or your school teacher about this. So if there is a strong communication bond between the parent and child, where the child feels like they can talk about everything, where the child knows we don't really keep secrets from each other, then you're not going to have that, and that's going to kind of trigger it. That my mom and dad have already said that that people we don't have secrets with people outside the family.
Yeah.
We used to play a game. It was kind of a silly game. It was called I Spy. And at the dinner table, we'd just talk about the things that we'd heard about or saw that day. And it might be as silly as I almost saw a cat get hit by a car. But we laughed with our children, not at them. But we made them know that they could talk to us about, we hoped anything. And that we could go ahead and have this discussion, so that there weren't going to be secrets. And if someone approached them inappropriately, that they knew that they could come to us and talk about it. And then finally, the trust. And Ronald Reagan's, in referring to the Russians, or the Soviets actually, trust but verify. We all, as parents, you have that inner feeling, and you kind of know when something's wrong, but you just don't know. Maybe you don't know what it is. Well, pay attention to if someone is paying too much attention to your child or making inappropriate comments. There may be a reason. I mean, one, they just may be antisocial, but that may be part of of the makeup that leads to the seduction and leads to the molestation. It always bothers me when I see parents say, go sit on Uncle Bob's lap or Uncle Harry's lap, and the child doesn't want to, and they force the child to do it.
Yeah.
Well, it could very well be that Uncle Harry's got bad breath, but it could be that Uncle Harry says something inappropriate, and the child doesn't know how to express it, but just doesn't want to be there. So don't force that on the child. Trust your child and trust your own instincts. So that kind of comes down to the affirm, communicate, and trust, and the act. Because if we don't act, I know there are men out there that are more than willing to act in our place, and they're the ones that are going to be targeting the children. Now, when it comes to the internet and some of those, I think, Troy, you said about I guess it was Chet who talked about the apps and everything. Yeah, I mean, this is certainly a problem I never had as a parent, but we have to be so careful about these interactive games that allow you to communicate, that the direct messaging and video chats and user anonymity and all that. I think it's important that we explain to our children that there are people out there pretending to be someone else. And just because someone says he's Bobby and he's 13 years old doesn't mean he really is Bobby and he's 13.
Right.
and periodically check the apps. Ask them, communicate with them at dinner. What games are you playing, or who are you meeting online? That kind of thing. I mean, they shouldn't be probably meeting people online from another world, so to speak. But it happened. I mean, I had a pen pal as a child, but it wasn't online with someone.
Yeah. I think, well, number one, where you started with the strong father figure, what a powerful statement to how effective the family unit is. With a strong mother and father that's present and in the home, that ought to encourage us all. And then affirm, communicate, and trust. I mean, that's an engaged parent, right? That communicates well with their kids and lets them know that they don't need to go anywhere else to feel loved or appreciated. And then also, even if you're doing all those things, you need to double check, right? Keep that
exactly.
Make sure that they're okay from that perspective. I look at it with like firearms in the house, or you don't start fires with gasoline. This is dangerous, or this is when you have that electronic device in your hand, there's some good that can come from it, and there's some very bad that could come from it. And so having those conversations about what's okay and what's not okay, I mean, clearly communicating those, I think, is really important.
Exactly. I mean, that is a good example, especially for men like you that are involved in hunting and guns, and you talk about gun safety with your children, and you just don't have a gun lying around expecting them not to play with it or to pull the trigger or to aim it at someone. I mean, you explain the rules of firearm safety, let them know what they are. It's the same way with the internet. You want to talk about online predators. You want to talk about risky behavior, things to look for and things to avoid. Look, we can't box our child up until he's 18 and then let him go.
Right.
You want them to be technologically sound. You want them to understand the computer and the many benefits of that computer. But you have to know that there are some real risks to the computer, and let them know about it. I mean, I know how much Matt loves hunting, and he's taken his daughters hunting, and he shared that joy with them. Well, it's the same way with the computer. Man, there are so many good things about this computer, so many things we can do. But just like the danger with the gun, there are dangers with the computer, and I want you to know about them.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, this has been a little deep for a little while, but some extremely valuable information. And one thing that we're excited about, we've invited you to our next segment of our top three. And today's top three is, what are we talking about? Moments that we cannot believe this is actually happening. When we think that while it's happening, like, I can't believe I'm here for this. And there's no better guest in the world than an undercover FBI agent to actually have this discussion with.
I think he was actually kind of nervous about this part.
Oh, yeah, because I can tell you all of ours are going to be somewhat lame in comparison, I imagine. So, Troy, you want to get us started with your top three? I can't believe this is actually happening moments.
All right, so I'll start with my generic ones, as I was referring to them earlier. But They are not generic to me. They're very special and dear to my heart. So number one, going to kind of group two together, was, of course, number one, marrying my wife, Hannah, and then a year later holding my daughter, our oldest child, for the first time. Mm-hmm. I was basically thinking, I can't believe I'm a dad.
Yeah.
This is scary. I think we talked in previous episodes about how reckless of a child and teenager I was. And for this person to be holding a child, a baby, I couldn't believe that was
You
happening.
didn't have to be
me.
licensed to become a dad either. You
Right.
just did it.
You just, yeah. So yeah, that's number one. Number two, I'm a huge metalhead. If you didn't know it, and for many years I listened to the band Korn, and they came to Wichita last year or 2019. And I was fortunate enough to go backstage, and I got to do a video interview with him with a local church pastor here, Pathway Church. Got to interview him, and they asked me to come video
The lead
it.
singer of Korn.
Not the lead singer, the lead guitarist, Brian Welch. And they were interviewing him on his conversion to finding Jesus, and it was just really cool to be there and do that. It was kind of
hang out with him for a little while.
Yeah, we went backstage, and he was like, well, where do you want to shoot it? He took me around. I was like, we shoot in this room. He's like, but the lighting's pretty terrible. And he's like, you know what? Why don't I'll ride with you. Y'all just take me to my hotel room. It'll be quiet. Like, we have all the time we want in the world. So we literally, after the concert, met him backstage. He hopped in the car with us. We drove him to his hotel. We went in, the people took us up to his room to get set up while he was like signing stuff for fans down in the hall.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
yeah, it was pretty cool. So huge fan of his, always have been. And then the third one was just a moment that I almost died. And Chet, you were actually there. We were at had a shooting contest, and it was very safe. The whole shooting contest went off.
There's a guy from Top Shot,
Really?
the TV show,
Yeah.
was invited, and a few other things. I think I won, Matt. Like all my shooting competitions.
We'll have to bring up that tape.
Yeah.
See.
Integrity.
But anyway, he like the person that won the shooting contest got to shoot this explosion at the end. Well, the Top Shot guy filled this little Folgers coffee can full of tannerite and put it on a 50-gallon barrel
Yeah,
drum.
55-gallon drum.
And so he put it out there probably about 50 yards, maybe.
Yeah.
That's probably giving him some distance. And we were kind of thinking, this can be a pretty big explosion pretty close. And Chet said, Troy, and I was filming the whole thing. Chet said, Troy, why don't you get behind that truck over there?
I was like, I can't believe this is actually about to happen. This is all going to, like, they're not putting that out they're about to shoot, Troy, get behind a truck.
Yeah. So long story short, the guy shot it and it exploded, and we found shrapnel behind us after it was all said and done.
On the video, you could see like half of that metal drum, I don't know, is going like hundreds of miles an hour straight towards people, but it didn't hit anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. God saved some people that day for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are my top three. Matt, what you got?
Well, I was actually going to you took one of mine with the kids being born.
Yeah. Special moment.
Yeah, because I was kind of the same. Like, well, you had the work up for 9 months, right? And you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. But then when you're actually holding the kids, it's a special moment.
Yeah.
So I will. That's obviously going to be in my top three, but now I've got to add, like before with movies and everything, like a 1A,
honorable mention.
Well,
of course.
yeah. But I'm going to go with, after my kids being born, I'm going to say was my first firefight in Iraq. It was the first firefight that I'd ever been involved in as a Marine. And I had tanks on one side of me, and I'm probably 20 yards from this tank, and it's firing these rounds, and I'm going deaf and getting concussed just from standing next to this stupid thing. And we've got helicopters overhead, and we've got F-18s flying over. And it was at that moment I kind of stopped. There's a full-fledged firefight going on, full-fledged battle. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking, seeing these planes fly overhead and helicopters and tracers going this way and tanks firing that way. And just like, I can't believe I'm actually here.
Yeah.
This is the coolest thing ever, and it really was. I mean, I was, because growing up, the Gulf War was in the 90s, and back then, I don't even think that we even my family, I think the only TV we had was a little 13-inch black and white TV.
Yeah.
And in the 90s still. Color TV had been out for a while.
I get you. I get you.
So,
Matt's always had it harder, Bob. He's been through it.
It's been through it the worst.
Yeah.
That's it. But so I had a little radio that I would listen to, and I'd listen to the news reports of all those guys over there, and listening to the reports that were coming back. And in that moment, it was like, man, I'm actually here, and it was pretty surreal and cool moment at the same time. And then I will say the next one would be when I came back after my injury. As both of you guys know, but some of the listeners may not know, I spent quite a few years walking with canes on my prosthetics, just uncomfortable. Everything hurt. All through the hospital, they didn't feel right, and I couldn't walk real well. To when I retired and came home and thought, well, maybe this place will help, and it didn't. I had the exact same results. But then I came to People's Prosthetics in Wichita, and the very first set of prosthetics he made me, I dropped the canes in his office that day, and I haven't used them since. And to be able to walk and just walk and not worry about tipping over, falling over, or being uncomfortable or things hurting and skin getting torn up, I was like, I can't believe I'm actually walking.
Yeah.
And so that was a life-changing moment for me. And it's kind of propelled everything that I've done since. But cause you go through those moments where it's like, well, maybe it's just me. I'm watching all these guys on YouTube be able to do all these cool things. And I'm like, back then I didn't weigh what I weigh now. I was definitely a lot younger, and I was definitely in shape, because that was my sole job in the hospital, was to recover, was a patient and get better. And that was it.
Yeah.
I had nothing else. Physical therapy, make my appointments, get better. And so over those years, because I spent 4 months in the hospital, and then, it was 2.5 years before I retired. And just got to that point where it's like, well, maybe it's just me, maybe there's just something with me and it's not meant to be for me. And so that's why when I came back here and it all worked out at People's, that it was like, holy cow, it wasn't me this whole time.
Right.
And, man, I'm actually walking. I can't believe it. So that would be the next one on my list. And then the third actually involves the gentleman that we have with us today, which is Bob. And going out, and he mentioned it earlier when we were talking about the Charlie Daniels concert. So prior to the concert, and don't worry, I got permission to talk about this before we talked about this. But Bob had invited us over to his house prior to going to the concert. And so we're in Bob's office, and he just starts playing these tapes of him with these mobsters and going through the recorded conversations that they'd had, And so here I am getting ready to go backstage, go meet Charlie Daniels. And here I am with this FBI agent listening to some of his undercover tapes, and the stuff that you see in the movies and all that, it's just like, I can't believe this is actually happening. This is really cool. This is like on my top things that's ever happened in my life. And so, it was very cool for me, Bob. I really appreciate you sharing those with me. And
wow.
And then just having that experience where both you and I were back there, and we were just sitting at a table, just shooting the breeze with Charlie Daniels. I mean, so we go from undercover espionage, and then going to, hey, we're backstage with Charlie Daniels, man. I'm living the high life, man. Right. This is pretty cool, And so I would say that's my top three. I can't believe this is happening moments.
Awesome. Well, I'll share mine, and then Bob, we'll get to yours. I've got a couple of them. So absolutely, first child being born was you guys were talking about how great it was to hold and all of that. Mine was somewhat traumatic.
Yes, it was.
My wife had some complications, and so they induced, and that did not go well, and we almost lost her and my son, which we were told was a girl up until the point that they they pulled him out during the emergency cesarean. So I actually didn't get to hold him. They were rushing him straight to the NICU unit. And we had not, this is the funny part about this, is we had not told anybody in our family what we were going to name her. We only had, up until this point, it was a great pregnancy, and we only had one ultrasound way back when, with not the 4D technology and all that stuff that they have now. And the guy was like, "Oh yeah, it's textbook. This is what a girl looks like at this age." And the doctor that we had actually delivered my wife. He'd been around for a long time, and so not heavy on all this technology and multiple sonograms and whatnot. So anyway, nobody knew the baby's name. And so we came out. Nobody really knew how bad things got. With it, it was my in-laws' first grandbaby, and my parents had just had their first grandbaby like a month before from my sister. So there was all new, and they were excited. So we came out with the nurse and my son to the waiting area on the way to NICU. And they were like, "What's her name? What's her name?" And I'm stressed. I'm like, I can't believe that I'm losing my wife and my baby kind of thing. And I was like, well, we had a girl name picked out, but it's a boy, and I almost got killed. Like, "You're a liar. Tell us the name." They were furious.
I was there.
Like, and then we went on, but I can't, it was what went from really excited about having a baby to, oh my gosh, this is not going to go well, to it turned out okay. But ever since then, I've had 2 kids since then, and it's never, whenever we go to the hospital to have the baby, it's never been I'm so excited about this. It's like, oh gosh, this can go really bad. So that was my first one. 2 other ones work related. One of them, I worked with a genuinely nice, non-creep of a guy. One of the friendliest guys you could be around. And we went out to eat. We were traveling with work, and we went out to eat at a restaurant. And this clearly a Latina waitress came to our table, and my coworker said, "Well, wow, you just got back from vacation." And she's like, "Well, how'd you know that?" And he said, "Because you're so tan." And I literally was like, "I can't believe this is happening." I think I said it out loud. And she's like, "I'm always this color." And he's like, "No, you're not. You really got a tan you went to the beach on your vacation." She's like, "Well, yes, I went to the beach on my vacation, but I promise you this is," and I'm thinking, I can't believe he's still talking. Like, I still can't believe this is happening right now.
Take your foot out of your mouth.
Oh, it was bad. And the other, and I still crack up to this day thinking about it. He argued with her. You're like, "Oh no, you're not. You're normally not that."
Was it the same guy that asked for chips and salsa at El Rancho?
No.
And they were like, "We don't serve those here."
Yeah, no, we're authentic. No, that wasn't the same guy.
Oh, okay.
And then another one, I was in a meeting with the whole plant. So I was in manufacturing for over 20 years, and we had the leadership of the factory that I was working in, which I was a part of. And one of the guys, we were meeting with the vice president of operations, and something wasn't going well in this one guy's department. And the VP of ops had a very strong opinion on why it wasn't going well, and said, "You need to make this change." And the other guy, and it clearly, it was obvious to everybody in the room, yes, that is exactly what needs to happen. But he was like, "Nope, I disagree. I think we should keep doing it this way." And the VP was ops like, "No, I think you should change what you're doing." And we're thinking, okay, then it's done. And he's like, "Absolutely not. I'm not going to." And I'm like, I can't believe this guy's arguing with the VP of ops over something so minuscule, and he's so incorrect. I mean, I didn't run his part of the business, but I knew that what he was doing was wrong. And so the VP of ops said, "Okay, you keep it the way it is, but if your numbers don't get better in X amount of time, then I'm going to fire you. Like, or you can just do what I'm asking you to do. And if it doesn't get better, then okay, my fault. I learned something." And he's like, "Okay, well then we're going to keep it my way." He's like, "Really? You're
Wow.
still going to go down that path and I end up getting fired?" And the guy's like, "Well, yeah, I don't think I'm going to get fired." We're all like, "Dude, you are about to get fired." Like, this is not a good thing. And look, I remember looking over at a coworker sitting next to me. He was like, I can't believe that we're here. We get to hear this. Like these are normally conversations that don't happen in front of a big group. And he's like, I know, I can't believe, So anyway, that was my third.
And he did end up getting fired.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was gonna happen. He had a get out of jail free card. Like if it doesn't get better, it's on me, not on you. And he's like, oh no, I'm going to go my way anyway.
My way's better.
So anyway,
That sounds like something Matt would do. I don't know.
Probably.
Bob, how about you? What are your top three? I can't believe this is actually happening right now moments.
Well, I'm probably going to disappoint you because I am a father first before I'm an FBI agent. So our daughter was born. We didn't know the sex. They didn't when we had our first child. That wasn't anything that you even was able to determine. And I thought it was going to be a boy. Everyone said it's going to be a boy. When she was born, I was disappointed because I was prepared for this boy. And then the nurse handed her to me and I held her, and that was it. Yeah. I mean, we've had a special relationship ever since. So that first child, that first experience is something. Now the second experience again comes to my son, who was our second child, but he was an outstanding baseball player in high school, and eventually, when he graduated from high school, signed a pro baseball contract.
Oh, wow.
But we lived in California, but he was selected for a special showcase in Florida, and it was at the Tropicana Stadium where this was to take place on Father's Day. And there were all these scouts and college coaches and everything. And he came up to bat, and the announcer at Tropicana, the stadium it's an indoor stadium, and there's few people there, but he announces next, now batting for the North, Joe Hamer. And it was like, I can't believe I'm here. It's Father's Day, and I am hearing
That's awesome.
The announcer for a Major League Baseball team announce my son's name.
Oh, wow.
In this stadium. And it was such a great moment. And his baseball career fizzled pretty quickly after he signed his contract. He got injured and eventually went on and spent 8 years on active duty in the Marine Corps. And I couldn't be prouder of him. And then my third one is my very first undercover assignment. And I really wondered whether I could do it. It was something I wanted to do. When I was back at the FBI Academy, there were several instructors that talked about UC work, and it just seemed like something I wanted to do. I have to admit, I missed Vietnam. I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1970. By then, they had pulled out most of the Marines from Vietnam. I went on to officer candidate school and spent 4 years on active duty as an officer. But I always felt guilty that I had missed Vietnam when I had people my age were over there. So I kind of gravitated. I thought undercover work would somewhat replace what I owed this country. But that first undercover assignment, I was preparing for it. And literally my knees were shaking. And it wasn't out of fear, but it was kind of like, the first time you get pulled over driving. Yeah. And it's the adrenaline just surging through your body. And my knees were shaking. And I said, God, don't let him see the knees. If he sees the knees, he knows it's something wrong. Right. And we went in, and it was a relatively innocuous meeting. This guy was paid tribute to to Joe Bonanno, the mob guy. Everything he did criminally, a piece of his action went back to Joe Bonanno. We got involved with huge art thefts. I mean, there's some great stories that even came out of that. But that first meeting, that first half-hour meeting, I walked out of there, and I had such an adrenaline high. I mean, it was like I was addicted to adrenaline from then on, and was always chasing that adrenaline junkie the rest of my career.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. That is. Thanks for sharing those. And we're going to close out, if you don't mind hanging on with us for a little bit, because we want to, I know at the end of this, I want to mention your website and a few of your, where people can get a hold of you. But I'm going to close out with a good word for our listeners, as if we haven't shared enough to help encourage some folks, especially parents, at this time in their life with their kids. But I've got a little story. Troy and I actually had the opportunity to go on a trout fishing trip up in the Holy Cross Wilderness in Colorado, about 5 years ago. And it was hilarious. We ended up leaving work after like 5 o'clock after work. We left, drove through to Denver, met up with some guys, 2 o'clock in the morning. And then at 4 o'clock, we got up and then started hiking, driving up the mountain, and got to 10,000 feet, got out and put our backpacks on and started hiking up to 12,000 feet. So going from Kansas, flat land, and none of us were in the peak performing shape at the time. But Troy was immediately behind me. And we got out of the truck and literally just started going straight up a hill. It wasn't like there's no, hey, let's get your legs stretched and whatever else. Nope. And I was sucking eggs, and I could hear that Troy was sucking eggs. I was
dying.
And Troy's, after, I don't know, we maybe have gone
15 minutes.
Yeah. And he's like, Chet. And I'm like, what? And he's like, man, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can make it. How do you feel? And then I sucked up every ounce of energy that I had. And I turned around with a smile on my face. I was like, dude, I'm feeling great, man. I don't know what's wrong with you. And then turned back around and, started, sucking air again and kept going. But we got almost to the top. And I've used this a couple times with some folks that have been struggling with things. And Troy and Sean were ready to give up. Sean's another buddy of ours. Like, hey, I don't know how much further we have to go to get to this lake we're supposed to be fishing, but let's just set up our tents like right here on the trail, and we'll get to it tomorrow. And I was like, look, I don't know how far we have to go either, because the guys we were with lived in Colorado. They were in their 20s, and they were, running laps around us.
Yeah.
But I was like, can you walk to that tree? Like, you see that tree up there? Yeah, I can see that. All right, can you walk to that tree? He's like, well, yeah, I can walk to that tree. Okay, let's walk to that tree. And we walked to that tree. Sean was in the same boat, okay, when we get there, we're going to stop and catch our breath. And then we stopped and caught our breath, and it was like, okay, can you walk to that next tree that can you see that tree? Yeah, I can see that. Okay, let's not worry about where the lake is. Let's just walk to that next tree. So we just kept walking from tree to tree, and it was about 30 paces in between the trees before we had to stop and catch our breath. But next thing you know, we got to the lake. Without giving up. And I think, for our good word for today, sometimes whatever it is that we have going on or whatever we have to put up with or accomplish, it may seem like we're not going to get there, but you just need to identify that next tree and go walk to it. And then when you get there, catch your breath, and then go find the next thing that you can go do and get to that one. So a lot of times, and I know like parenting kids, it's like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? Like, I'm not getting any sleep. And, heck, with all the things that we've been through in the last year with coronavirus and kids, schooling at home and whatever. Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen, 2-3 years from now, but what can you do this week? Let's get that done. And when you get that done, let's talk about the next thing, just get that one little incremental goal that you can definitely see and go do, and not just think about how massive it is this task that we have. So that would be my good word for the day.
Setting small goals.
Set small goals. Go
Achievable.
get them. And when you link them all together, you realize you actually got something really big done.
Yep. And I think we might have a picture of you taking a break.
Yes, we do. We do. Cue the picture on YouTube.
Yeah, we need to put that picture up for sure, because that's an epic picture.
It is hilarious. He did not want to go any further, especially when we happen to come across a bear scat on the trail. Like, what? There are bears here too? Like,
yeah.
Yes.
Why are you hanging our food over there? What?
Yeah. Anyway, Bob, thank you so much for spending some time with us and getting some valuable information from you. And for those of you that, if this is your first time of hearing of Bob Hamer, let me tell you, I think you have bobhamer.net is your website. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Go there, and your series with Josh Stewart and Matt Hogan, both of those series with some fiction writings of an undercover FBI agent. Fantastic. And I was actually talking to Troy's uncle about this a while back over Christmas. He was talking about one of his favorite authors, Vince Flynn. And I remembered Vince Flynn writing a review of your books and talking about how I think it was the Matt Hogan character being friends with his
Mitch
Rapp character. And as soon as I said that Vince Flynn was a big fan of your work, he's like, I'm buying all this stuff right now, because it carried a lot of weight. And I could tell you I thoroughly enjoyed your books as well. So if those of you interested, go to bobhamer.net, and that's HAMER .net, and you could see a lot of his work. And Bob, you're available to speak as well if any organizations are out there looking for a good word from you. They can find you through that.
And I will say that he is a very good public speaker and makes the follow-on act look retarded.
Well, thank you guys for having me. Matt is truly one of my heroes and a great friend, and I'm glad that I was able to share a little bit of time with you guys.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking the time. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Yep.
Hey, thanks. It's a wonderful thing to be talking to somebody that does so much and has done so much for our nation. And I think about some of the dark places you've been on some of your missions, but the story about you just taking time out to go visit wounded veterans as well just shows how true your heart is. So I really appreciate you, Bob, and thanks for being with us.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate you. Thanks, Bob.
See you, Matt.
All righty. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, let's
What an episode. That was awesome. We went a little long, so let's close her out.
All right. We're out of here.
All right. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Hardheaded. It was a great episode. If you want to hear more from Bob Hamer, go to bobhamer.net. And don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else that you listen to this, Spotify and all the rest. If you want to see us in person, go check us out on YouTube. We'll see you next time on Hardheaded.